I was also annoyed that you were seeing stories of vegans charging into state restaurants and playing music of cows being killed. I was like, shut up and go away. I don't come into your gruel restaurants ever and shout about what you do to the bee community in California when you eat your almonds and almond milk, right? Billions of bees exterminated every year in a 6-week cull in California so vegans can eat almonds and eat avocados.
I've heard this bee argument before. I've been talking about this bee argument for quite a while. I've had a couple of debates on this bee thing, and I actually mentioned the bee thing in my campaign against Piers Morgan in 2019. So he acted like it was a cull of bees in California, but actually it wasn't. And from what the research seems to show, it's the combination of two chemicals that were partly responsible. And what Piers Morgan fails to recognize is those bees are being used from the honey industry, actually. They're being borrowed from the honey industry, and vegans already boycott honey. So we already boycott the industry that is making money off of hiring those bees out to pollinate these crops. There are other methods of pollination, like wind pollination, that could be used instead. But because there's all these honeybees, why not rent out the honeybees and move them around and use them to pollinate these crops? Another thing, vegans already know that when they purchase plant products, there's going to be insect casualties to protect crops, and there's a very good justification for that, because if we let the insects eat the crops, human civilization as we know it will perish. So what do you want, Pierce? Don't kill insects for crops, or civilization perishes. I think we've got a very good justification for the deaths that happen in crops, and not so much of a good justification for gas chambering a pig to put in a sausage roll. Another thing is, we already accept a level of crop deaths in order to eat our plants. Why do you think there's any more harm in moving bees around to pollinate crops? There isn't. There's probably less death that happens to pollinate these crops by moving bees around. More deaths of bees happen in the honey industry. When they're done with the bees, they often gas them to death. And of course, like I said before, vegans already boycott honey. And bees don't just pollinate almond crops, they're used to pollinate a bunch of different crops. So on this page, it says 70 out of the top 100 human food crops, which supply 90% of the world's nutrition, are pollinated by bees. That's crazy. Now, I saw on Earthling Ed's video, I didn't know this before, that bees are actually used to pollinate alfalfa, which is a feed they use in the dairy industry quite a lot, actually, and in the dairy industry here in the UK and across the world. But the point is, bees are used to pollinate many different fruits and vegetables, and it's not even clear that just moving bees around is a rights violation of these bees, like it is in the honey industry when you're chopping the queen bee's wings off and leaving her in the hive and then exploiting the bees for their work so they can make all this honey and then culling them off when you don't need them anymore. Like when we have all of these different honey alternatives like maple syrup and like sugar, and we've got an array of different syrup alternatives. And if we didn't have the honey industry, they wouldn't be borrowing all these honeybees to do this pollination. We'd use another source of pollination. So yeah, we don't have a double standard with plant foods. Fine to eat almonds. I mean, unless Piers Morgan wants to see the death of civilization from us boycotting plant foods because they kill insects in the process, or a result of moving bees around, there'll be some bee deaths. If they stop combining those two pesticides, then maybe the bees won't die. But the main point is, we're very consistent, and that the fact that insects die in crops does in no way justify breeding and killing billions of animals, trillions of marine animals, for sausage rolls, sandwiches, eggs, and milk, when, all of that harm on top of that is completely unjustified. And probably one of the strongest points to make is that, according to the Joseph Poor research in Oxford, 83% of the world's farmland is used by animal agriculture, which means that most of the farmland is actually being used to either graze animals on or to grow crops to feed animals. So most of the farm-related harm, crops, harvesting alfalfa, harvesting grasses like hay, spraying crops to feed animals, corn and oats and barley and wheat and soya beans and all of that. So all of that crop-related harm is magnified when you eat eggs from chickens, dairy from cows, meat from all of these animals. Even in the production of farmed fish, they're feeding those farmed fish either more fish or plant foods from certain seeds. So if you're worried about the harm that happens in crop production, you should definitely not be eating the animals who are fed multiple times more crops in order to make the steak, in order to make the sausage roll. You should just be eating the plants directly, and it's completely morally justified to do so.
Do you carry